Any company, as you mentioned, Yossi, will go through a journey of like 5, 10, 15 years. Takes longer now for companies to go public. It's pretty unlikely that's going to be straight up and to the right for the entire 15-year period. It's very unlikely. So you want to back individuals and founders who really have what it takes. Like be delusional to an extent, if you prefer, that things will get better when the times are rough.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining the Boardroom Club today to another episode of the Builder series, featuring executives from top tech companies and venture capital, revolutionizing the world as we speak. My name is Yossi Garmazi, and I'm joined also by a good friend of mine, Jacob Chitunza. Jacob.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you all for joining us today.
So today we are fortunate enough to interview none other than Niko Bonatsos, who has been the manager director of General Catalyst for the last 15 years and even led the firm's early stage practice. Among his investments, you could find some of the most well-known names out there, like Snap, Dishcode, and Mercor, among others. So Niko, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Yossi. Thank you, Jacob. Excited to be with you today. And yeah, it's like day 5 for me of being unemployed because GC on January 1st, 2026. And it was an amazing run while it lasted. They are some of the best in the business, very grateful, and their best days are in the future.
That's always look up to the future. And with your investments, don't forget us in the future. So, Niko, I wanted to start with a very interesting question about your journey because it's quite rare. You studied and worked in Greece, the UK, Japan, and the US, of course. But how is this random walk across the continents help you to spot global winners like Remote or Discord before they became all the household names that we are aware of now?
I would say that investing is a journey to self-awareness. So being able to collect a number of personal experiences that broaden the way you think, be able to read and be perceived as trustworthy with founders or potential founders that come from all different backgrounds and walks of life matters a lot, because the vast majority of what I've done in my career as an investor is to meet mostly underappreciated, mostly first-time founders, mostly immigrant founders that, some of them go the distance and create a category defining business. And after a few more years, everyone canonizes them and thinks they're like able to walk on water. So yeah, having had the privilege of growing up in Greece, humble beginnings, having worked in Tokyo, having studied in the UK, having studied in the US, it gives you a perspective about how to interact with different types of people. And in some instances, see the future or the version of the future that a founder pitches you from a different point of view. So been very blessed in that regard.
I guess it's much easier to go for the second time or third time founders in terms of success rate. But also when you're first time, you get something to prove. So maybe it take you to the next level. And indeed, from Europe to the US ecosystem, you work in both places. But what has been the biggest or cultural mindset that you needed to shift in order to succeed as an investor?
So right before being an investor, I was a founder of a failed social networking company because back in 2009, 2010 at Stanford, everyone and their mother were building a mobile app social network. And prior to that, I was a perpetual student researcher. So like as an engineer, you have that mindset that, oh man, I'll build it and they will come. So I had to basically, park that on the side, especially when I met amazing technical talent, where many of them were friends of mine, or I had seen them and knew how smart they were academically. And it's like, oh, we have to invest in that person because they are so gifted, academically. However, that doesn't always work in practice. I had to shed that, okay, if we build the perfect product, they will come. If the team only has very strong engineers, but no real ability to get in front of customers, have curiosity to really do the company building side of things beyond just building product, that also probably doesn't work or scale over time. And there are many other things that I learned along the way, thanks to my fantastic previous partners. And I've made a ton of mistakes too.
That's all about learning from mistake. And it's a great segue for my follow-up question, because you have been in the venture capital space for a while, but was there anything that really changed all your mindset, maybe about over-indexing on founders, timing, or something else entirely when you go and you evaluate founders or companies?
Of course, I have, because as I mentioned before, investing is a journey to self awareness. So I was not as smart back in the day evaluating the potential of future founders. I was more eager to anchor in something else, like, oh my God, this is a hot market, or wow, look at
The
the
time
early
is so big.
metrics that they have. Yeah, the TAM is so big, or the early metrics of that company are so insane. And only to find out that, you know what, if you're not 1,000% sure that the founders are freaking awesome and the team is really clicking together, if those folks are not going to scale, then a better team that's doing the same thing probably will eat their lunch. So I've learned to take a lot of risk when it comes to product, or like, oh, is this market going to be big enough because it's a new market? I've learned to take a lot of risk on these too, but I don't want to take any risk, especially if you know something or felt something going in about the co-founders and the initial team. The other thing I've learned is that timing matters a lot. And that's where I get it often wrong, because we invest in a team, we think they're freaking awesome, but they might be 2, 3, 4 years too early. And if they're like so stubborn, which often is good, but sometimes if you're stubborn for too long,
Yeah, don't get in love
um,
with the idea, with the product.
exactly. You're stubborn for too long. It's okay to be 2 years too early, but to be 5 years too early, not okay.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that actually Guy Titanovich, the founder of Check, a cyber company for all the audience, he told us when we hosted him that it's all about the founders, and the idea is sort of a commodity. Once you get a good founders team, you're good to go. I mean, of course, you probably wouldn't build Apple tomorrow, but it's the most important basics out there. And I want now to shift the gears a little bit, because we send a lot of cold emails. I mean, we send one to you, and we send also to potential employers. And I guess you also received countless emails for founders that you want you to invest in them. But funny enough, you yourself famously cold email Elon Musk in 2009 and explained why Tesla might fail. And he even replied. So what is the anatomy of a perfect cold email that actually get a response? I know that it's kind of like off-track question, but
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of cold emails, especially for folks who are young and they're getting started in their career, or folks who don't have credibility, they're out of network, they're immigrants, all of that stuff, because you've nothing to lose. Like, what's the craziest thing that can happen if you send out a cold email? You get ignored. Okay, no problem.
nobody will remember you tomorrow.
Exactly. So, and in a week, you can repackage it a little bit. And now with AI, oh my God, you don't even need to do that. It can happen automatically. And maybe the second time, if you get lucky, right? So, huge proponent of cold emails. So you ask, what is the anatomy? It should be short. It should be straight into the point. And if you're targeting, meaning cold emailing another founder or a senior executive at a company or an investor, just give them a little bit of feedback for whatever they do. Because anyone who's like ambitious, well-intentioned, obsessed with what they do, are always curious about what others think about my product or an investment of mine or my team, especially if you're somebody who is a user or a customer of that product. So I would read that email. Of course, if it's like, 7 paragraphs long, or it has, hey, here's my executive summary, and it's like 53 pages long, probably you're not going to read that. So short,
Yeah.
sweet, straight into the point, like a few sentences of what your feedback might be, and one sentence of what your ask is. I think your cold email is pretty damn good, dude.
My perspective when I send it to executive like yourself, so I try to say who I am and then show that I really done the homework about them, something super specific that probably someone didn't use AI to write it because it's too specific, and then say, okay, I actually care about you. Now I want to host you. And this is the Boardroom Club past speaker, blah, 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 blah. And
No, you got it. Yeah. And the other thing to note is most people check their email on their mobile phone, right? So if for whatever reason you send them an attachment and you can't open it, or it needs a password to take a look at it, or it takes a long time to load and all these things, immediately, delete. Or if you make crazy claims, if you say let's say you're cold emailing an investor, like, we're going to be the first $20 trillion company. Sure. Thank you guys. Delete. Or our founding team has 275 years of work experience. Great. I'm not looking to talk to museum artifacts. Delete. If you make stupid claims like that, that doesn't work well. Having a little bit of sense of humor or being a bit like elaborate, okay. But straight into the point with some good feedback too.
100%. And when you meet a new founder, first 30 minutes, which signals matter to you the most and which one you think are overrated? I mean, more like face-to-face sort of conversation.
Rarely I would have them walk me through their deck. I would try to understand them, like what motivates them. What was their upbringing like? Why are they building that particular idea? What is in it for them? Do they have any chips on their shoulders? How do they think of their co-founders? Why do they think they and their co-founders are the absolute best team in the world? What is their rate of learning and the rate of making progress? Do they treat every meeting, every decision-making opportunity as a learning opportunity? How do they think about hiring? And then have them talk to me a bit about how their space has developed and what is their point of view about where they want to be in 5 to 10 years. And the folks who are really obsessed and have been thinking about specific problem and a specific market for a long time, they can talk in extreme detail. And if you ask them a few times the question, why what you're saying is the case or why what you're talking about might happen, these folks who are the very sophisticated, elaborate thinkers have good answers. Everyone else trying to make things up, And there are a few individuals that you come across who's like, oh my God, if like few percent of what you just said comes true, I absolutely want to be part of that amazing ride.
Amazing ride. It could be even Snapchat, right? Because you're known for baking products that initially I guess feel like crazy, funny, or controversial. But when you first saw Snapchat or even Dub Smash, what specific user reaction told you that this thing is actually disruptive rather than just a toy out there?
So for Snap, I would say a few things. One, the founder wanted everyone to smile whenever they opened up the app. Like he wanted to deliver happiness. Second thing, he wanted to build the fastest camera app out there, even faster than the native camera app. So like there's like 3 taps and your snap goes to one of your friends. Pretty freaking awesome. Third thing, it was controversial because any guy in particular, you would talk about it, they'd be like, oh, that's sexting. Why would you want to send disappearing photos? But then, you quickly figured out that 80% of the users were girls, like women. And, it's unlikely that they were using it for sexting with their other female friends, right? And then fourth thing that was very controversial at the time, kind of obvious, of course, many years later, everyone back then was building on top of Facebook because you could be building it on top of Facebook so that your user could easily sign up. They wouldn't need to create a new password, all that stuff, and they could spam everyone else on Facebook. And the Snap folks on day one, they're like, we don't want to do that. We want to be privacy focused. Yeah. And we want to own the data and data disappears. And we're going to create our own graph. And everyone else is like, dude, why? That's so hard. Why would you even bother to attempt it? Try to find product market fit. And he was contrarian in that regard and clearly got it right.
Fortune favor the bold, as they say, and you need to be different and somehow crazy, controversial, and funny in order to really make some great impact on the world. And many of your wins, like Snap or most recently even Mercor, required, I guess, some patience through a long period of skepticism, right? But how do you build and maintain this kind of conviction when the market sentiment is clearly against you? But you said, I carry on with this company no matter what.
It starts with the founders. And this is where understanding what really motivates them very well matters a ton. Like, what is the core reason for doing what they're doing? And they're willing to obsess 24/7 for the next many moons and be the most incredible salesperson, recruiter with infectious enthusiasm to convert others to the cause. So like that's the thing, like understanding what motivates people, because if you get that one right, then it's up to you to make the judgment call. Okay, I think that person can walk through the desert, find an oasis, and probably survive, right? Yeah, we'll find the water. And in some instances, maybe actually even walk back. But if you're not sure about somebody's motivation, and now it's very noisy, for example, now you're a young founder, you're doing something in AI, boom, you raise the first round. Like at times when things are frothy or in hot spaces, that is the hardest thing. Okay, in a world where everyone gets funded, how do you pick the folks who, when the times are hard, will keep going? Because any company, as you mentioned, Yossi, will go through a journey of 5, 10, 15 years. It takes longer now for companies to go public. So that it's pretty unlikely that's going to be straight up and to the right for the entire.
So what I will take from this conversation is look for the founder that are most obsessed about their idea. It's all about obsession because sometimes the tides are against you, right? And as they say, the higher up the mountain, the more treacherous the path. And you did mention the AI revolution, and I wanted specifically to ask you that many dismiss new AI startups as sort of a wrappers on open AI, but with investments like Mercor or even Hive, how do you differentiate between shallow wrappers and companies building real defensible moats that really could take their idea to the next level and build a company, maybe even generational company?
I would say a few things, right? First off, it's not about what all this AI stuff can do for you today. It's more about the rate of improvement and where things are heading towards. The same way that we've been talking about founders and their potential and their learning ability and their momentum as learning machines, it applies to technology and market. So any of the tools out there, like if they're getting to improve so much, oh my God, over time, they could make a dent. Now, I do try to understand, is this company building real technology? Do they own the IP? Is there any scarcity value? Are they unique in that regard? Are they the only people in the world that they can do that stuff? Do they hire incredible technical people to do that stuff? Or is it, okay, they're just using a bunch of other open source libraries, or like they're using other people's software? They're very short-term thinkers. And then the other thing is, I'm trying to be very informed about what's going on at the larger labs and what is really core to them and they will do themselves versus, oh, this one of the 15 other things we're trying, but we don't have a core team and we're not putting a lot of resources over there.
I would say also specifically, you mentioned the labs. If you open a company and tomorrow OpenAI, I don't know, release a feature or even Anthropic, it could literally destroy dozens of startups if you don't have a real moat. And something else that's very interesting about venture capital is that you actually yourself spoke about solving massive problems like transportation and even hypersonic travel. Very exciting indeed. But outside of tech, what is the one moonshot for human society you are most personally rooting for in the next decade? Is it space exploration, maybe robotics? Well, robotics is kind of tech, but or something else.
I mean, robotics, I would say, is tech, right? So like the fact that we have like a new form of intelligence out there that over time could get much smarter than us for more and more tasks, that's pretty amazing, right? And this could do a lot of wonderful things. This could potentially have some adverse effects as well. But there are a number of other things that could be incredible, transforming the human society outside of tech, and they're more around culture. For example, what if we can figure out how to have more babies again, right? And we can stop having this fear about demographics collapse that is really hard to reverse and many decades in. That's like cultural, I would argue. What if we, as a human society, try to figure out how to deal with the constant overflow of so much information, a lot of it fake, that makes us hate ourselves, or our information diet is not as good, or we stop trusting each other. So, in other words, how can we teach ourselves when we're young or as we go through life outside of the traditional education system, how we inform ourselves and how we have critical thinking to interact with more and more information out there and go through life? That's important. So these are some areas that I think can have profound effects, like how we think about like having more or continuing to have fewer kids in the future, or how do we deal with all this information that we were not genetically programmed to deal with that kind of information? Until, of course, Elon does his trick and he and others let us do the brain implants that can let us have a computer next to our brain too.
That will be cool though, right? Then you mentioned the demographic. I think that it's a big thing besides Europe, of course, in Japan, with all the demographic there, that not enough
Yeah.
babies.
Japan, China, so many countries, many places in Latam. There's so many.
Yeah.
The only place where like things are up and to the right, broadly speaking, for the demographics is in Africa.
Yeah. And Niko, one last question for myself before I pass the mic to Jacob. In the hardest moment in the company journey, what does real value from a VC look like? Beyond capital and introduction to other potential clients?
At the earliest stages, it's about truly believing and offering the emotional support and comfort space or safe space to the founders so that they can do their stuff, as well as making sure that you learn from their style and can try to, when you see things a few months earlier from when they're going to happen, to give them specific feedback without sounding prescriptive. So to sum it up, need to show strong conviction, provide a comfort, like safe space, so that they come back to you with good news and bad news, and then provide them with feedback, prevent certain things from happening that otherwise would probably happen. All the other stuff, as you said, introductions, I'll help you raise your next round, I'll help you become famous, all that stuff, all the good ones do, and that's why they have a reputation. But the personal connection and relationship of trust that you can build with a founder, that's hard to replicate. And often you also get it wrong.
It's all about trust and also empathy as well. And yes, so Niko, thank you so much for answering all of my questions. Jacob, without further ado, the floor is yours.
No, thank you, Yossi. Thank you, Niko. It was quite a fascinating chat, especially when you mentioned the demographics. I mean, we are really creating more talent in Africa. Of course, it's now shifting also. You have people like in my generation, they no longer want to have kids. Thank you very much. So shifting the gears, I mean, me, Yossi, and other guys, we've just finished graduate school. We are keen on starting up businesses, right? So if you were starting from zero today, where would you personally focus your attention on as a builder?
First off, I would ask myself, do I want to be a builder, right? And am I doing it for the right reason? So I would take a step back, perhaps, and we'll try to become more of a curious mind who is eager to learn and have a lot of the right attributes that could make me a successful builder. For example, when I see new things that pop up, am I curious to learn about them? When I see new tools that come out, am I eager to try them? when I try these new tools, am I willing to lose face and publish some of these outputs? Even if I'm very nerdy and very technical, am I also curious to learn a bit how to network with others who are different than me and get out of my comfort zone and talk to potential customers or recognize I need to figure out how to do marketing. And I don't think I'm the best in the world. Great. Let's go and meet with 30 marketing people and see how I can speak their language a little bit and bring them closer to me. And maybe I one day recruit one of them. So that's the kind of stuff I would focus more about, because a specific market opportunity or a specific technology, when you're like 18 or 22 or 25 or 29, you're talking about, dude, you have many decades ahead. It's more about that mindset of constantly being curious, think cure, be willing to lose face, be trusting of others, being able to collaborate closely with others so that you can set up yourself for success for many decades to come versus, oh my God, we got it right because we got into NFTs in 2019, or now we're looking really good because we've been using some of the AI code gen tools since 2 years ago. That stuff comes and goes, or the advantage they offer you over time erodes.
That's true, really, to always figure out whether you're a builder and also to know who are the people that will be relevant in the future for building of your business. You've said talent is universal, but opportunity is not. Having come to the US as a Fulbright scholar, what is the survival skill immigrants bring that the local founders often lack?
It's hard to generalize. However, to answer your question, I would say that immigrants have to try harder than the locals because they need to prove themselves. I would say they also tend to go the extra mile because they just don't have anything else to do. Like if you show up at a country and you have no money, clearly you need to work hard to make money. To show up at a new country and you don't know anyone, you will try to meet people. And then as you try to do that, because you don't have a network, you will of course work harder too. Sometimes you bring also a perspective that is valuable where you landed because you've seen the world in a different way that if you're smart enough to adapt a version of that to your new beginnings, could make you be a differentiated kind of person or build a differentiated business. And then I think that when you're an immigrant, you tend to be a really good survivor kind of person. And in the history of time, if you are able to be the tree that, or like the warrior or whoever, you like, that is the last man standing, there's value towards that. So like we immigrants, that's what we know really well. We need to survive no matter what, often with less, often be okay with the criticism or the adversity that most other normal people would have quitted many, many moons ago. That's what I would say.
That's very true. We noticed that during our MBA when we were recruiting, our experience from outside the America wasn't really recognized. So we had to constantly work hard to prove ourselves. And I can resonate with that. Shifting the gears, in late 2025, you co-led the seed round in X Partners, a company that focuses on gaming and consumer app financing. Do you believe alternative financing, like revenue-based funding or creative debt, will eventually replace traditional VC for most of the consumer apps?
Absolutely. I don't think that equity-based VC funding or based VC or venture debt kind of funding are the only ways to fund a business. I think in a world where you can create more options for founders and builders and operators out there, that's great news. And they should always be thinking about, okay, what is my cost of capital and who can offer me an unfair advantage to have a shot at winning? So companies like PVX are able to do that. and can provide a lower cost of capital to potential consumer subscription founders or gaming founders in ways that no one else can perhaps provide. Or like my friends and former colleagues at the GC Customer Value Fund. Similarly, that can help so many folks grow faster, way more efficiently without any dilution vis-a-vis growth venture capital, for example. So I think it's really good for founders, especially of companies that are like Series B, C, D stage, either themselves to be financially literate or have like a CFO, somebody on their team that can just explore the various options, put them on the table next to each other, be like, okay, that makes sense for that part of the budget. That makes sense for the next 1 year. And pick and choose wisely.
Having a cheaper option of finance sort of helps people work around and build greater things. They are not limited. Now, looking into other perspective, when you look at the startup teams today, what's the ideal mix? Is it purely technical, business-led, or a hybrid, and why?
I have a stronger bias towards tech heavier teams because I tend to invest in the very first round, maybe like second round or maybe third round. And what I've learned is that the idea in the beginning evolves or the market the first year or two changes. And when you have like a team that's more technical, they are faster to adapt and pivot to the next idea versus like a business heavy team. Now, it's hard to generalize. There's an industry of exceptions. And there's very strong survivor bias because you only hear about the winners. However, I do like teams that are consisting of fully technical founding team members. Of course, if they all only care about writing code and talking to no customer, problem. I do like technical teams where actually they're building for themselves or they're able to identify others like them or the early customers and really curious about getting in front of them, having them use their product, understanding the difference between that customer might say something, but actually do something else. Be sophisticated about all those different nuances. That stuff I pay a lot of attention to and matters.
I think it also reflects back to what you mentioned before when I asked you about building. You said, look, I would love to be a builder and I know the problem, but also I want to be able to speak the language of the marketers and the sellers. So it's always important to at least have a mix. Now, we're in a world where we always come and ask for advice. What's one piece of advice you consistently give founders but feel they still underapplied?
It depends on the setup, but there's only one reason why companies die. They run out of money. Now that you've raised money, do whatever it takes to not spend it in stupid ways. The other piece of advice I give if it's like pre-founders, right? Like, the two of you are thinking about starting a company. Often you obsess, oh my God, the investors are going to take so much of my cap table, all that jazz. But dude, the biggest dilution you will have is like, okay, if I have one or two co-founders that I'm not sure about, that's way more dilution than what you will get from investors. So like, be very sure about who you're getting in business with, in other words. Like just because somebody's your friend doesn't mean that they will be an amazing co-founder. Just because somebody was over there and believed in you in the early days doesn't mean that they will be the most incredible partner for you as you're building the business, in year 2 or 3. Maybe they were phenomenal for year 1, but they might be really terrible for year 3. So don't die. Pick very wisely who you work with and reevaluate them every few months.
You mentioned right now you can literally ask people who have worked with previous guys, how were they? If you're looking for founders, it's always good to have that connection. We were taught to have mentors as we were rising through the ranks in the corporate world. Who has had the biggest impact on you as a mentor and why?
I can't say it's like one person other than my parents or my wife, right? Because those are characters that have been a part of my life for a long time. So if I were to point out, I would say, yeah, my parents and my wife. There have been so many others that were like incredible during a specific moment in time because they were the person who inspired me to come to the US and do internship with a biomedical devices startup, or they were the person who inspired me to come to the US to do some research at a university, or they were the person who inspired me to work in venture capital, or they were my first major mentor in venture capital. So it's not one person. I think what matters in a learning professional context is, again, the mindset of trying to put yourself out there and find mentors. And Jacob, you might be the most amazing mentor for Yossi for this year, for his next step. But then as Yossi's like, that's great, but I don't think that's for me. He would need to find another mentor for what might inspire him to do next. So like, it's just for us to have that kind of mindset. I'm always in the business of collecting mentors. Is more important than who the actual person is.
It's actually true that when you look back as we're kids, people who used to be our friends are no longer our friends right now because we are always growing and we are always demanding for different things. Now, if you could have coffee with anyone, alive or historically, who would that person be?
I would love to actually have a coffee with Alexander the Great and understand what really, really motivated him to do the unthinkable after his dad died. And he was very young. And he spent the following 10 years going to all these places and going through all this hardship to prove that he could be the leader and the ruler of what was the known world at the time and beyond. What motivated him? Like when you're like the son of a king, right? Who united all the Greeks for the first time. And your dad dies and you ascend to the throne and you were mentored by Aristotle. Like Aristotle was his teacher. Okay, sure. You're like, great. Year one, I'm having a good time. Year two, maybe I want to conquer the neighbors, right? But then to just keep going and going and going and wanting everyone to speak Greek and use the same currency and build infrastructure. And I don't remember how many tens of Alexandrias, like new cities, he established. Yeah, would be very curious to see what motivated that guy.
I think you're not the first one to tell us about how you would want to talk to these historical people that have really made a huge impact in people's lives. We've been advised it's always good to have a book that you read to get the knowledge. Is there a book that has meaningfully shaped how you think about business or life?
Yes, this book is called Poor Charlie's Almanac, and it's a series of talks and essays that the great late Charlie Munger put together. Charlie Munger was the longtime business partner of Warren Buffett. This is a book that I keep next to my bedside furniture. I read it often. And he was the kind of guy who, and I had the privilege of meeting him a few times actually. He was a great thinker, and he could combine theories and learnings from different sciences and come up with like multidisciplinary frameworks that turn out to be useful in business.
I always listen to his short videos every morning. He was like straight as an iron. Thank you very much, Niko. It's been a pleasure talking to you and, hope to continue connecting with you. Let me pass back to Yossi to give our closing remarks.
So, Niko, I can mention that we hosted also the CEO of Cerebras, and I think he was the one that mentioned Charlie Munger. The reason was that Charlie could talk about any subject, complicated as it is, and speak it very simply. So that's what I remember. So, and Niko, I do have one last question before we close it. If you want an investor, something completely out of the blue, alternate universe, what would it be? Don't have to explain, but
probably I would be like an academic, like a business school professor or something like that. But this is
It's true.
professionally, right? Because otherwise I'm just like a dad, and that's like the main responsibility I have nowadays.
I agree. That is also kind of a teacher, though, right? So, Niko, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure hosting you, learning from all your vast experience. So, we super appreciate it. And for everybody else in the audience, so stay tuned. We have other amazing episodes. We just hosted earlier today. The CEO of Zapier, the president of Cisco and ServiceNow is going to join us also in a couple of weeks. So, it's going to be interesting. And watch the shorts of this video. It's also going to be awesome. Niko, thank you so much.